anything you build in WPT will work on a browser, but it will equally work on a tablet or on a mobile phone. You make no change whatsoever to the system you've built, and the application will work on a mobile phone. It's about building a user interface that is simple, straightforward to use, does exactly the job without all the other stuff that is a distraction and unnecessary. And then all you're going to do is, well, what queues do you want? What workflow actions do you want? And you just say that those that you need to be available, you make available. Those you don't, you keep out of the way.
Hey, good morning, Mike Ball. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks, Paul. Great.
Great. We're real pleased to have you here today on this episode of Capture Capitalists. You and I have been working together now for a little over a year, I think it has been, and we got introduced through a party over at Hyland as a result of an engagement that a client had brought forth to us, and I kind of, once I heard about this offering we're going to talk about, which for the record happens to be called Web Portal Toolkit, and I'm going to let you explain that in just a little bit. But, I found that it was kind of the best kept secret inside of Hyland. And
yeah, that's probably true.
I think you heard in my initial response when we first connected, I'm like, where's this been all this time? This is like an incredible offering, and I'm like, this is everything my client has been looking for. And I was just so grateful that we got introduced, and hit it off really well. I thought in the beginning, and you spent some time, I could tell you were extremely passionate about WPT and Web Portal Toolkit. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Hyland, and we can dive into WPT. How's that sound?
Yeah, sure. I guess, so I've been with Hyland about 12 years. Similar roles in the industry. I actually worked for Perceptive before Hyland, so it's kind of funny now that all my old work colleagues that weren't for a little while are now back as friends, so that's great. So 12 years at Hyland. Most of that, my background is pre-sales, so for about 8 years of that I ran the European pre-sales team. So I think it's high. We had about 16 pre-sales guys that reported to me. For the last 3 or 4 years, combination of partner training and then what we're going to talk about today, this Web Portal Toolkit. And also my team is tasked with building solutions with OnBase, so kind of pre-built, ready-to-go solutions for the marketplace, particularly for international, which is non-North America for Hyland. But the very fact you and I are working together suggests that that's not always the case by any means. So I have a number of contacts that I work with all the time. So that's the professional stuff. I guess away from work, most of it revolves around sports, so sports crazy. If you only know one soccer club, Chelsea is the one that you need to learn about. And I've kind of followed them all around the world, including places like Moscow and Tokyo and places like that. So it's quite a big deal for me. On the States, for my sins, I lived in Pasadena for just over a year. So I'm a huge Rams fan. So,
Okay.
Lots of stuff around sports, that kind of stuff.
So by your accent, you're telling me you're not from these parts?
I missed out the minor point. Yeah, I'm based about 20 miles west of London, so I'm in Windsor. There's a big stone house on the hill where the royal family live. That's about a mile away from me.
Wow.
So yeah, based out of there. Yeah, we go over for tea and biscuits every sort of other Sunday afternoon and whatever. It's real friendly with the neighbours.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
they're pretty close. It's about a mile away. So.
Wow. Yeah, I think the old Downton Abbey series, that made its way over here, obviously, really opened up the eyes of a lot of people in terms of what life is like back, not so long ago, living in the UK, and royalty and families, the heritage of the UK, and actually quite fascinating to watch that show. And my wife,
it's not that up to date. I mean, I can assure you, my 17-year-old daughter is way more Chicago than she is Downton Abbey.
Yeah, but still, it's kind of nice to look back at the past times, and some of it was really good. Maybe even some of it wasn't so much, but certainly was beautiful. I mean, it was quite a breathtaking scenery in that show. Enjoyed it quite a bit. So you've been at Hyland now for 12 years. You've had a number of different roles, and you've kind of picked up on the WPT stuff, and have kind of corralled a team together and are running with that. Why don't you tell me a little bit about our viewers and listeners what WPT is, and where does it fit in the Hyland mix of product offerings?
Sure. So, kind of, I guess, mission statement of the Web Portal Toolkit. It's basically a tool that allows you to build custom web front ends. So you can build web-based front ends, also mobile-based front ends for OnBase. So all the functionality is still about OnBase. It's still all the things that OnBase is good at, all its document management, the security, the workflow. That's still what we do. But what our tool does is gives you a way of customizing those screens. And you'll see some of that as we look at it and talk about it more. I guess, to explain where we got to where we are, it's probably a bit of a history lesson. About 3 or 4 years ago, we were finding, particularly in Europe, that there was a big increase for people requesting custom interfaces. So the OnBase clients, the different clients, Unity, things like that, are great and do the job they need to and do it very well. But we were finding more and more people saying that they wanted simpler, more focused user interfaces for their users to work at, so that they could get straight into doing their job. And we did looking around, and it got to a point where we could actually pin a pretty big monetary value on the projects that we were losing. And projects where we got maybe down to the last 2 or 3 people and we weren't successful, quite often we would be told, well, it's because your user interface was a bit too rigid and that kind of thing. So kind of back then, me and my then boss, the head of Hyland International, what are we going to do about it? And we found out a guy in our services team had done 2 or 3 projects that effectively did exactly this. And we really looked at it and said, can we take what this guy, a guy called Scott York, had done, and to some extent, whatever extent that was, productize it and make it a reusable tool that we could do. And that's effectively what we've done over the last 3 years. So it's grown. It's pretty much a non-code environment. You don't do any programming. So it kind of helps to have some knowledge of web development, but you don't need to be able to program in JavaScript or some other web language as well. There's people in my team, two of the girls in my team, for example, are 2 of the most experienced people I know anywhere in the world on OnBase. They have no web development skills, but they use WPT all the time to build these custom things. So within WPT, we effectively have a component approach to everything. So we have pre-built components, or as we call them, widgets, for things like viewing documents, uploading documents, OnBase folders, which are a very popular way of categorizing your documents, workflow, and fairly recently, probably only about a month ago, we introduced support for WorkView. So you could bring OnBase WorkView data into your tool. And effectively, you use those components to build up the screen that your customers or your users want.
So, it's interesting that you explain it in that way, because, when you and I first got introduced, I had like a problem, very much like what you talked about early on here, and that is, the dang UI was creating some impasses with, prospects or customers, and they're like, it's too rigid, right? And we came across that very situation. And, we were potentially going to have this customer look outside of the Hyland framework for a solution to solve a vendor portal challenge. And so when you and I had that conversation, we obviously kind of gravitated towards vendor portal. And as I'm kind of putting together this dialogue for you and I in preparation, I'm going down this path of vendor portal. And really what you're talking about is providing a platform that can take all of these different components Hyland offers, whether it be workflow, whether it be content display and retrieval and searching, or case management. I mean, go down the list, right? And you're saying that WPT, Web Portal Toolkit, gives us a framework to really change that user experience and personalize it in a manner that is going to directly suit the needs of the customer. And we can do this without programming, which really, you set me straight, right? Because I'm going down this path of vendor portal and wanting to talk specifically about that, and we'll get to that point, because I think it's a great use case of how WPT can be used. But that's not the end-all be-all. That's not where it stops. And so these custom widgets and things, maybe you could talk a little bit more about those and how that actually can be personalized or customized to work for a customer, and just cite a couple different examples of where you've seen that done.
Yeah, sure. So fundamentally, we do all the hard work, so people using the tool don't, right? Everything is obviously based on the OnBase API, and I dare say your team has got some API programmers probably trained up within it. But it's a pretty major job, right? I mean, these guys are hardcore programmers. They're not someone who's skilled in OnBase who, this time next week I'm going to be writing API code. They are full-blown programmers.
Correct.
And actually, one of the biggest jokes in Hyland is I'm API certified, and no one understands how the hell I passed the exam. That's a bit of a sideline. So we take that complexity of the API. The first thing we do is we put a layer in there that's based on a technology called REST. So REST is really the way that you would write an API these days. And in fact, Hyland is doing a lot of work on its REST API at the moment. But prior to that existing, we built our own one as part of the Web Portal, and it just takes a lot of the complexity out of you. Even that, though, doesn't get used by developers of WPT, because we use that within the widget. And you literally say, I want a workflow widget. And then all you're going to do is, well, what queues do you want? What workflow actions do you want? And you just say that those that you need to be available, you make available. Those you don't, you keep out of the way. Even down to things like the keywords that associate with the document. OnBase is extremely powerful, and with that, potentially can be made to be quite complicated. In WPT, we can just expose the keywords that the users really need to see. And all those internal things, or all those technical keywords that are used by maybe the accountants in the business but mean nothing to the end users, we can hide those away so the end users are just seeing the things that are crystal clear to them and everything else. And you really, I mean, someone described it before as just being a bit like building a Lego model, right? And it's taking these different Lego brick components and just putting them together into the format you want. Add to that, you then can completely brand it to your customers' requirements. So company logos, color schemes, right? It's the kind of stuff that we take for granted these days. We want to be, in something like a vendor portal, it is part of our marketing, right? And when a supplier logs on to the IDT vendor portal, it should be branded as an IDT website. So WPT allows you to do that extremely easily, again, in a non-technical way.
So we're talking about taking these widgets, and is it like a drag and drop experience?
It's not far from it, and we it's not quite drag and drop. We have built a prototype, and we're still unsure whether we're going to pursue it or not. But it's really, I think the best way of looking at it is you have a blank page which is a grid, and into the cells on that grid you can choose to put or not put a widget. So when we design a screen, it's typically, okay, you know, the high level, well, we need a list of our invoices. It'd be quite cool if we could give them some instructions. Maybe we want a way of uploading documents. We would just position these widgets onto that invisible grid to set how you want to use it, and just really build it.
It's more of a configuration process, kind of, as opposed to, like you say, somebody writing code. I mean, they're basically, once they become familiar with the tool, they're not having to write any code to make it work. They're simply including these widgets onto this canvas or grid in order to provide that functionality on that screen.
Exactly.
Okay.
So our simplest example is a widget called Basic Search, and the whole point of it is to run an OnBase custom query. So a custom query is just doing a search in OnBase. Okay. You would say you want a custom query, so you first of all make it visible. You would decide where you want it on the screen, and then you would point it at the OnBase custom query that you'd already built in your OnBase system. And effectively, on our page, we would run the query. You'd see the results set, so you'd see your list of resumes or your list of invoices or whatever document it were, and then you double-click on it, and up comes the document. And I could do that in about 3 minutes to get documents coming back into the system.
So if we compare and contrast just for a moment the WPT user experience versus, you know, the standard clients that come from Hyland, how would you compare and contrast those? Just at a high level.
They're kind of different needs, right? I mean, our clients, whether it's Unity or the web client, they are general purpose tools to do all the good stuff within OnBase, right? And some of them have a little bit of customization where you can hide away things that are going to be more advanced than some users will need, but not a great deal. Ours is going to be much more focused at a specific user interface to do a specific job. I'll give you an interesting example. I was down in Australia and we were visiting a huge customer of Hyland's, one of Hyland's biggest worldwide customers. And we were literally sitting in the canteen with this bunch of people from the customer. And I got chatting to a lady who was responsible for internal insurance policies for this company. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, I love OnBase. It's really great. It's made my life so much better. She could not have been more positive. And then she said, but the only thing is when I come in the morning, I have to load up the Unity client, then I have to click on here, then I have to choose this, then I have to click on there, then I have to fill this out, and then I get to the point where I can start doing my job. We went back up to the office, and in about an hour, we built her a UI that in the morning she could come in, and she's literally going to be the only user of this user interface, but she would be able to just walk straight in the morning, and there is everything she needs to do her job. Searches, ability to upload, even ways to send things to other people, which we would do behind the scenes in OnBase workflow. But from her point of view, all she did was fill out a simple form that says, I need to send this to Paul, and we take care of getting it over to Paul.
And, you know, here's another use case where I thought WPT plays well, and that is, you know, what internal users, you know, or power users of OnBase, you know, Unity client probably makes a lot of sense. But when you're an external facing partner, right, you know, you don't want them to have access to that full-blown Unity client or even the web client, because there's too many other things going on in that client which are good for the power users internal in the business, but not necessarily applicable to those on the outside. And you want to give them what they need, but really nothing more, right? You want to control the experience to make it as simple as possible. Because let's face it, you don't want these people logging calls into your help desk like, I can't use this because I don't know how, right? You want this to be a, you know, you could bootstrap yourself in terms of learning how to use WPT from a consumption standpoint, really like you would any other web browser based app. Is that correct?
Yeah, and a perfect example of that, we in Europe, we do quite a lot of ISO compliance projects where we need certain certifications like quality management, environment management, that kind of stuff. And we get asked, particularly in public sector, we get asked, do you have these accreditations? So we have to do an annual process to keep that accreditation. So we have an auditor comes in once or twice a year. Now that's not the most fun day of the year, full stop. But what we used to have to do was sit there with the auditor, and when they requested certain documents they wanted to see, we'd have to go and find them and bring them up, and he'd go, okay, thank you, now can I see this? Whereas what we do now, we have a Web Portal Toolkit front end, and we literally log him in and basically say, there is the view, you can see everything that you need. And typically our only interaction with them now is where the coffee machine or the restrooms are. I mean, they just get on and do it themselves to check the things that they need to do.
So, one of the things I know customers or prospects will be thinking of, okay, this is another access point into the content services platform arena. What about security? How do I know when I'm exposing this portal outside of the organization? How secure is it? And do I got to replicate security models, or set up a whole different identity management solution to allow access? How does that all work?
Yeah, that's a really, really key point. And, after the wow factor has gone and we're talking seriously to customers, that's obviously their next point. Effectively, all of the security in terms of access and what you can do is managed by OnBase. Okay, so our entire user model is the OnBase user model. If you can't do something in OnBase, you cannot do it in WPT. If you can't see a document in OnBase, you're not going to be able to go around the security and view it in your WPT screen, right? So you authenticate against one of our portals using your regular OnBase username and password. Any parts of OnBase that you're not allowed to go near, you won't be able to do it at all. Then you've got a couple of other aspects. You've got the kind of authentication in the first place, and this is an area where we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment. So Hyland introduced a full identity platform back at Community Live last year, and there's been a couple of issues with the way that it's exposed through the API, but we're working with those guys to bring that in. So we'll be able to support things like single sign-on. And then again, I guess it's the kind of thing that particularly younger people expect, but we're all getting used to, things like even using your Facebook logon or your Google logon to be able to access the system. So you would be able to do that. We've done some stuff around two-factor authentication. When you log on, you'll get an SMS text message with a number that you then have to enter into the login screen. So we've done some stuff around that, and that's available. And then I guess the third component is we strongly advise all our users to use SSL, so HTTPS connections. And so by putting a certificate on the server, we can encrypt all the communication backwards, forwards. Technically, we don't enforce it, but we do absolutely everything to convince the customers this is the way you should approach it, and we strongly advise you to. So.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine anybody in today's climate, with so much emphasis on security, why they wouldn't want to go the SSL route. I mean, that
exactly, and if you look at people like Google, they're trying to push the whole internet into being SSL based, really. So it's becoming more and more the norm.
Let's talk a little bit about the deployment options with WPT. There are a number of clients that are that are on premise, right? And they are maybe not considering going to the cloud. And then you have clients that are contemplating going to the cloud, and then new customers coming on board that won't want to talk about any other option than the cloud. And when we talk about the cloud, I'm talking about the Hyland GCS data centers located all around the world. What are some of the considerations? If I'm an on-premise customer, can I use the Web Portal Toolkit or is this designed specifically just for cloud deployments? How does that model work?
Yeah, we're pretty agnostic, really. We can work on the cloud. We can work on premise. We've even got customers who are using non-Hyland cloud approach, so they're hosting themselves in something like AWS. We can work in all of those environments, and you know, there's a project that you know very well that IDT and our group have been working together on, and you know, that's a fully GCS-based solution for a significant customer, and you know, I'm not gonna lie. There's been a couple of little humps where on that project we've had to get over a couple of things, but between IDT, my group, and GCS themselves, we've got over those points, and absolutely everything works as it should do. And as you would expect, more and more of our customers are looking at the model, particularly with what's happened across the world in the last couple of months. Everyone's looking a lot more at a hosted option to do that. So we're working in the environment. We also, interestingly, we also support every licensing model of OnBase as well. So we have, within OnBase, we have named licenses dedicated to a particular person. We have concurrent, which is a shared pool. And we have something called query API blocks. We support all of those within WPT. And in fact, we can even have a mixture of the two. So it's becoming more and more common now where internal users will use concurrent licenses or named licenses, but external users, maybe students, suppliers, candidates for job roles or something, they can use query API blocks, which are effectively a kind of calls per hour model, which is much, much more conducive to public access than internal access. So we can match both of those. We can match the different environments. You know, even your guys developing on that GCS project, they work locally on your servers, but they point to an OnBase server that's in GCS. When they've done all their work on WPT, they promote their code, they send it across to the GCS support, and they put it into place on the server and take care of that for you.
Gathering, we can even do a hybrid approach. So if a customer has, let's say, you know, an on-premise based OnBase system, but they want to have maybe the portal WPT put into the cloud, we could have that kind of a connectivity or integration going on between the two, so that maybe it's a way for them to ease into the cloud rather than having to jump all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, and that's a good point, actually. I never even thought about that. But we had a project with a customer in the Far East that had about 6 different cities around Philippines, Hong Kong, that kind of area. And they were noticing some performance issues at first. WPT technically is 2 components. It's the REST layer and then it's the UI. And what we did, the REST layer sits on the same server as OnBase does. I believe it's in Manila, but one of the locations. And then what we did, the UI stuff, we actually put out on the hosted Linux server more local to where the end users were. So someone in Hong Kong would connect to a Hong Kong-based server for the UI. That in turn would go off to Manila to get the OnBase documents and things back. So it's really pretty flexible.
Yeah, that's a neat experience to illustrate how that hybrid approach can work, even taking it a level deeper than I was even originally thinking. So thanks for sharing that. So hey, talk about some of the use cases. Let's talk just a few minutes about that before we get into the vendor portal, which is my personal interest. But I don't want to stop there because you like I said early on, you corrected me in thinking this is much more than just a vendor portal. So let's chat about that for a little bit. Some use cases.
Yeah, we've. It's interesting because we're all the time we're coming up with scenarios that even we didn't think about. You know, it is very much whether it's sales engineers at Hyland or with a partner, we get a lot of incoming calls to my team where it's just, hey, what about? And you know, we go down a theme that we never really think about. Some of the examples of things we've done in higher education. We've done a number of portals for student applications. So effectively a prospective student can come in, they can register with the portal, and that's part of the functionality we have as standard. People can ask to get access to the portal, and we can take them through a process where they fill out a form. Then in the back office, our own team or the customer's team can approve or deny that access. But then they come in and they get a view of just their documents, just their processes, that kind of thing. So in the case of the student application, they ask for access. They typically go and fill out a application form to choose the kind of courses that they want to do. And then in the back office, they'll have a different WPT system that will make sure that the student has uploaded all the documents that they require, so proof of identity maybe, transcripts or the version of transcripts we use in different parts of the world. And that back office can make sure they've got all the information they need from the student. We've even, in South America, we've even started getting into taking online payments. So the student in a couple of universities down there, they have to pay almost like an admin charge to even apply. Not their full tuition fee, but an admin. We've integrated with PayPal and a couple of other payment systems where once the students filled the form, uploaded the documents, they can pay their $30 or whatever it is to do the admin, that kind of stuff. As it goes through the recruitment process, then eventually they get made an offer, and the portal reflects that, and now they're being asked for the additional information for the specific course they've now kind of been designated on. Other things, we've got a great customer in South Africa who effectively are a franchised hotel chain. So they run a lot of brands that you would know, Marriott, Holiday Inn within South Africa. And effectively their request to us was kind of almost a frequent flyer system for their customers, for their hotels. So I'm sure you've been in that situation. You check out of a hotel for business, just as you think, right, I've got to put this somewhere safe with your invoice that you've just been given. The taxi pulls up and you stuff it in your bag. Come expenses time, it's like, where the heck is it and whatever. This system allows you to go back.
Never.
Well, you're the boss though, so you probably don't even need the paperwork. With this, I can log into their system. I can see all my stays. I can get a reprint of the invoice. I even get access to like my own personal account manager, which if I see an anomaly on one of those invoices, I get all of their contact details and I can call them, email them and pick up that kind of stuff. And just all sorts of variations like that. It's very, very projects. We did a great project in Brazil for the Brazilian Stock Exchange about companies uploading all the information they need to be listed on the Brazilian Stock Exchange. And we got told in no uncertain terms WPT won that project because without the front end, they couldn't give this public-facing portal that was there. And then I guess the more interesting projects, some of them seem to be more around mobile than web-based. So, for example, in the UK, Hyland ourselves, we use an app that we built for tracking that our staff are safe. So if some major event happens, big fire in central London or, God forbid, a terrorist attack or something, as part of one of those compliance standards that we have a duty of care to our staff. We issue an alert, and then all the guys have an icon on their phones, and they basically go into the app, and they can choose to send us an SMS, they can send us a voicemail, but what most of them do is just press a button, we integrate with Google Maps, and we can see where that person is. And we can, from the management team, we can monitor where everyone is. And you know, if the worst happens and some kind of terrorist attack, we think people are safe, but then the threat goes mobile, we can actually review the situation and we can kind of pick up the phone and say, hey, just jump on the train, get out of London, you know, that kind of thing. I hate to admit that we had to use this in anger, but we did a test on a Wednesday. On the Friday, we had a news story breaking that there was a terrorist attack right outside the Houses of Parliament. The biggest issue was everyone thought it was a joke. They all thought it was still part of the test. And so we had to send it again saying, guys, this isn't a test. Within 6 minutes of the news story breaking, we knew where every single member of our 40-person team was.
Wow.
And so we knew where they were. We knew they were safe. We advised a couple of them to get into other areas of London. And luckily, that was all kind of dampened down really quick, but it was there. And then I guess the last one I mentioned, and I obviously can go on about this for hours, but that led
I said you were
into
passionate.
Yeah, well, yeah. Some might say boring, but I prefer passionate. I like that.
Not at all. Not at all.
We did a system for a construction company in the Far East, and they used the same principle as our Safe app. And what they wanted, believe it or not, was a modern version of the old literally clock in, clock out system of arriving and leaving work. And apparently in the Philippines, every single person has a smartphone without fail. Even people who don't have a home apparently have a smartphone. So their app, the user interface is literally 2 buttons: clock in, clock out, and that's it. So that went in, and that was great. And then HR started to have a few suspicions that a few people were clocking in when they weren't actually at work. So we then added a feature that they have to be within half a mile of the construction site that they're working on when they clock in. And they get 3 strikes. After the 3rd time that happens, we just use OnBase workflow. We route their check-in to HR, and HR will get involved to discipline and everything else. So that's great. Well, okay, we think we've done it. So then the customer says, well, what about billing? What about billing? Well, we have people like maybe architects who get billed to individual projects. So we extended the app further, and now when Fred, the architect, arrives at the new headquarters of HSBC, he clocks in, spends a couple of hours doing whatever he does there, clocks out, drives across Manila, arrives at somebody else's building, clocks in, clocks out. We feed that data directly to the billing system so that HSBC get charged for a couple of hours of his time, and the other customer gets charged for what they need to as well.
Well, that's fantastic.
The best bit about it, sorry, Paul, but the best bit about that, we only spoke to those guys because all they wanted to do was change the logo on the front screen of the Hyland mobile app. And that conversation snowballed into that situation. Yeah. So that was cool.
That's very cool. That's very cool. What I'm also hearing is you go through these illustrations, especially on that higher education one that you led off with. We talked about forms. We talked about workflow. We talked about, OnBase documents, uploading of documents. So you're really using WPT to really fully exploit all of the strengths of the OnBase platform. And you're doing this with configuration, not through somebody writing a bunch of lines of code. That's quite fascinating. Let's chat a little bit about the vendor portal for a minute. I told you we were going to get back to that subject. So as I indicated early on, when we first reached out to you, we had a client that was in need of a vendor portal. They were going to go out into the market because they looked at some other offering we had that didn't quite fit the bill. The UI was too rigid, and they were like, "This isn't going to work in our environment." We are a multinational organization with a bunch of divisions. We have suppliers that could supply product to one division, but they could supply it to some, many, or all of them. And we need a portal that's flexible enough to be able to allow our supply chain to interact with these different divisions, based on the relationship of the different business units under our corporate umbrella. So it was a complex scenario that, certainly the standard interface inside of the Hyland product suite isn't going to suffice, and we talked about that. You're not going to want to give the Unity client or the web client or the thick client when that was around. You're not going to want to be giving that to external facing users. And then also the licensing implications of that. And when you're talking about a supply chain of thousands, it becomes even more of a daunting challenge. So when we got a hold of you, we chatted about this, and we said, this is the obstacles we're running into. You said, aha, I've got something for you, Paul, and it's WPT, and thus began, the journey we've been on for some time now. Not because the project is taking that long. It's just because when you get into large companies, they move real slow. So, the project itself is going actually quite well. But let's talk about Vendor Portal. What are some of the things that we've had to deal with for this customer? Why don't you share, some of the creativity that we had to come up with to solve some of the customer problems that they requested of us?
I think on the actual, and you're absolutely right, the complexity of a company the size we're talking about, I would absolutely say 90% of the issues we've hit are that based on that reason, right? And we've had conversations with your project manager getting involved where they've ended up with internal conversations about how the business process should be handling a lot of what they're doing, and that sidetracked the conversation. I think for them, their system is still pretty simple. It's still pretty straightforward, certainly in the version 1 iteration that we're at the moment. One of the biggest issues for them is their branding, right? I mean, they're not alone. Any modern organization will have a marketing department that quite rightly wants to maximize their branding, their brand awareness, and all of those kind of things. And in that case, probably the only complication I can think of is within that group, there are 10 businesses that are completely different and potentially unlikely given who they are, but potentially someone could be a supplier to one of those business groups and not even know that they're part of the overall group or anything else. So if I'm a supplier to Company 1, I need my portal branded as Company 1. If I'm a supplier across multiple companies within the group, then we have a choice, and we're still battling with that choice of what they want to do. Do they want to choose one of the ones, or do they want to just go to the corporate level and carry that branding? The bottom line is, and even the call that I did prior to us talking today was with your project manager, and it's just getting them to make a choice about how they want them to work. WPT can handle either approach. And, I'm just kind of, hey, Jim, just find out from them the way they want to play it, and we'll build it accordingly. So the system is pretty simple. Of course, as you mentioned earlier, security is key. Of course, I should only be able to see documents that are relevant to my company. I shouldn't be able to see somebody else's invoices and things like that. But as I mentioned, that's largely taken care of within the OnBase system that customer that you guys have already built for them, because that same security is already in place for their core OnBase. So actually, building the portal is pretty straightforward. And apart from trying to arrive at a situation where the guys only build the user interface once and then effectively copy it 10 times so that we don't have to build it 10 times, it's actually been pretty straightforward. Jim will kill me for saying that because he didn't say anything about that. But it has been pretty straightforward. The system they're doing, I guess in comparison, I've got a customer in Europe who all your listeners would know. Let's for now just say they're a large motorcycle manufacturer, and they've been a very happy user of OnBase for about 8 or 9 years now. They love it. And I got called in there about a year ago, and their head of finance really kind of just let rip about, but I want to do that. I don't want to give my suppliers this user interface. It's too complicated. My team love it, but my suppliers won't understand it, everything else. So we talked through. Long story short, on top of an existing system, we spent about an hour talking to them, about a day using a screen mock-up tool that we use as part of our design process to put together the design with all the corporate branding, with the colouring and everything else. We had an hour-long call to approve that design, and one of my guys went in, came out in 3 days, built the entire vendor portal, and had it live out to, I think at the last count, about 6,000 suppliers accessing now through that vendor portal. And to be brutally honest, I want to know what he did on the third day, because I still think it was a 2-day job. Yeah, and so we built it. Now, although that's kind of light-hearted, you know, the building the OnBase system still applies, right? All of the stuff that you guys have experience with, other OnBase users, you've still got to build an OnBase system right. You've still got to do your discovery, define your document types, build your workflows. None of that changes. Not one bit of that will change. But to actually put WPT on top of that once the OnBase system is good to go is generally pretty quick. The only thing that tends to affect it, obviously, is functionality that's not a standard part of WPT affects it. But then some of the electronic forms requirements can start to get quite advanced about the business logic you want to build into that. But beyond that, our projects are pretty straightforward.
I remember one of the unique requests from this particular client we're speaking of. You know, it's the usual kind of things in a vendor portal that come up, right? I want to be able to onboard my vendors, right? Submit invoices and supporting documents, check payment status. We'll talk about that in just a minute. You know, make sure they understand what the protocols, you know, are with respect to the relationship. There's no, you know, bribery going on, and, you know, all those kind of like legal mumbo jumbo policy statements. You know, they want to publish those kinds of things. The interesting one that came up was this particular client has a bunch of different ERP systems, right? And, you know, depending on what division the supplier is coming into, dictates, you know, which ERP system data needs to be displayed. And I guess the classic example is the payment status. Where does it sit? You know, is it being reviewed? Is it the check been caught? And, you know, the way all that works is different from one ERP to the next, to the next, to the next. So, again, WPT, it's flexibility being able to address that. Can you talk about that just for a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So there's nothing that we do that's magic, right? I mean, we're not going to be able to address the actual point of how a payment status is set on SAP compared to Lawson compared to Workday, right? But what we do is give you the hooks or people the hooks who do know where that information is and do know how to access that information to bring that into the OnBase environment. So there will be some programming involved, right? That integration, some of which Hyland already has. So in some ERPs, SAP is a good example. We have great integration with SAP, and we can do a lot of that information in the standard Hyland product offering. In some other slightly more obscure ones, we probably don't, all right? But effectively, all you would need is providing that ERP system gives some kind of API, providing you can get hold of the skills, whether it's with your own team or a third party that you work with, to use that API to get to the other systems. We give you the way of building it into WPT. We have a great partner down in South Africa, and they sell, fundamentally, all projects they do are OnBase and JD Edwards. And the CEO came to me one day, bought me a few beers, which apparently he thought was going to help, but it didn't. And effectively said, yeah, exactly. I'm quite happy to take the beer, but it won't make any difference in the end. And effectively said, hey, Mike, can you build us an integration with JD Edwards? And at which point I kind of spat the beer out. I was like, no, but, you know, joking apart and respectfully, if I was to list out ERPs in order of the ones that I want to build integration with, JD Edwards would not be right at the top of the list, all right? So I kind of said, no, we can't. You know, I have a small team. I obviously have to look at the resourcing of that team, and it wasn't even worth the effort to see where that would fit into priorities. But what we do within WPT is give you a couple of ways of extending it. At the API level, at the REST API level, we give you the ability to write your own REST API calls, so you can make calls to other systems like ERP or something else. And we also, I talked about the widgets that we have, and we'll show when we jump into the tool in a minute. But as well as our standard widgets, we give a mechanism called custom widgets. And again, someone will need to program to take advantage of this, but effectively we give them a blank frame, and within that frame they can build out whatever they like. So if they have the development skills, they can do it. We have people building integrations for Google Charts. I mentioned the PayPal integration that we've done in South America. That's just done through custom widgets. But then this partner in South Africa, who of course, being a JD Edwards specialist, had API skills themselves. We showed them how custom widgets worked. We showed them the hooks. They went away, they invested, and they built somewhere between 10 and 15 custom widgets for JD Edwards. And now when they sell AP solutions that are OnBase and JD Edwards, they automatically sell WPT. And within that, along with the OnBase components on the screen, they also have JD Edwards components on the screen. Mm-hmm. End users don't know, don't care. They just get the information that they want. But sometimes it will be JD Edwards data, sometimes it will be OnBase data. Completely visually, no way of telling the difference, but behind the scenes it's going to the right place.
A lot of people will say, when they're thinking about OnBase, they're like, it's a document imaging system, document management. And, they lose sight of the fact that it's a platform that can do a number of different things. Certainly document management is its heritage, but the ability and the strength of the platform is it can integrate with all of these other key line of business systems that a customer has, whether that's Salesforce or SAP or Infor or JD Edwards, like you say, or Dynamics platform. And WPT is no different. It can integrate with those different platforms. You guys have built it in such a way that gives us that capability. So when this problem came up, well, at first, I described it as being complex because they have all these different ERPs. It certainly adds a degree of challenges, but it's not insurmountable. And the platform's flexible enough to be able to interoperate with those different solutions in the market.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's going on. So it's really cool to see it unfold. Try and do that with a fixed, standard, out-of-the-box client interface. That's going to be difficult.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and do it in such a way. And one of the things we always aim for, and of course so does everybody, but we really aim for is we don't think that a portal that you built with WPT should need any training, right? It might have a few instructions on screen alongside what you're doing, but you should pretty much be able to sit anyone down at a WPT screen and then pretty much figure out what they've got access to, that kind of thing. And, part joking, part serious. A couple of times I've sat my 17-year-old down in front of it and she knows nothing and could care even less. But, how would you get to this and how would you get to that? And a couple of times we've just used that kind of testing to do it. People have such different expectations now. Everyone is so used to the way that applications that they just access across the internet, dip in, out, and whatever. Even with all the power that OnBase gives, they still expect that simplicity, ease of use, and cutting straight to the point. No one's got any patience anymore, right? They want to get straight to the information they want immediately, or they're going to start moaning and criticizing and everything else. And that's really what we bring it down to with WPT. And I guess, sorry, not quite the question you asked, but just struck me and we should bring up. I've mentioned a couple of times mobile applications. It's really important to stress anything you build in WPT will work on a browser, but it will equally work on a tablet or on a mobile phone. You make no change whatsoever to the system you've built, and the application will work on a mobile phone. Of course, it needs to be the WPT server needs to be visible outside your firewall. But providing you've addressed that architectural issue, anything you can do can be done on the phone. And even down to things like when you upload documents on a browser, you're going to go off to the file system and find scanned invoices that you've got. On a phone, that same upload button will actually take you to the camera, so you can use your phone to take pictures of the documents that you want to upload to OnBase. Not one single change to make the system work on mobile that also works on the desktop.
Okay, so that's a good point to reiterate and make sure that people know. I don't have a different experience because I'm constrained to an iPad or a Android device, iPhone. I'm going to get the same user experience, and it's going to be optimized for that device.
Right, and
yes.
You know, given the situation now where hopefully we're all starting to come out of lockdown and everything else, at the point we recorded this conversation, we were in the middle of the virus situation. But more and more people are thinking about how they can work remotely. So access to things through portals across the internet is becoming more important. But even thinking back to the guy that this started with, my boss at the time, although he was American, he was based in Tampa, Florida, not Cleveland, Ohio. And we have an internal process. And if you or another reseller or one of our own salespeople wants to do a discount for a customer or something, you would make a request to your account manager at Hyland. They then have to fill out a form. That goes up the tree and it gets approved. And John would say, you know, when's his dead time? His dead time is airports and things like that, right? And when he's sitting at Tampa Airport in the morning and he's got 45 minutes to kill before boarding, that's when he wants to be doing his admin. And he said to me, so what I have to do, I have to boot up my laptop. I have to figure out how I connect to Wi-Fi in the particular airport I find myself in. I have to VPN into Hyland. I have to go into Hyland's internal OnBase system. I then have to go into the workflow part of OnBase. Then got to find the queue. Then got to find the document. Just as I find that pricing request, bing bong, my flight's being called.
Time to board the flight.
Now he'd be able to use WPT. He'd be able to whip out his phone, review it on his phone. All the pinch controls that you accept to use on a phone to zoom in on areas would work. And at the end of it, he can make his decision by approving or rejecting that through regular OnBase workflow, but on his phone.
Yeah. I mean, that's talk about efficiency and the user experience being exceptional. I mean, there's no better way to do it than what you just described. So, well, thank you so much for this explanation and the illustrations of some of the use cases. We've been talking quite a bit. Why don't we do some show and tell?
Okay, so let's jump into a browser. And I'm going to go to Gateway, which is just a shortcut to my demo system. So in here, effectively, this is the first thing you've seen of WPT. Everything can be changed. So colors, the logos can be branded, as I mentioned a couple of times. If I close the login screen, you can see in the background, this particular site has been configured to allow users to self-register. So this could be a vendor, a supplier who wants to access the vendor portal. This form can be customized, but effectively we need all the information to say that this supplier wants to access it. When he hits create account, we'll drop that into OnBase. And in the background, the administrators of the system, at its simplest level, they'll either manually approve or reject it. But effectively, they can do anything they need to establish that supplier can be given access to the site. If he's approved, he'll get created as an OnBase user. We'll set security keywords, which is the way that we make sure he can only see his stuff, not somebody else's. We'll probably assign him to some OnBase user groups to decide what he can and can't do. And we'll send him an email saying, hey, you've been approved. Here's how you connect to it. And we'll give him a link that he clicks on, and it brings him to the login screen. In fact,
let's stop there. If we can, let's just stop there 1 second. If all the criteria, that the supplier provided in that form is acceptable and meets all the business rules. What you're saying is that potentially could be a completely automated provisioning process, and the end user or the end customer of OnBase really doesn't need to be involved manually if they choose to go that route. And then of course,
Absolutely.
Okay. And then of course, as that request is made, because OnBase does a terrific job of logging all of that activity, I'll have all the historical, information about when, who, why, what was the approval criteria, all that's going to be tracked in the workflow database. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
like you say, the approval can be automated. I've got a customer in the Middle East that all they do is when the supplier has filled out a form, they do an automated credit check. So they'll go away to a third-party credit agency. They'll check that new supplier, see if his credit is worthy. If they get a positive response back, then that supplier is approved. But for them as a business, that's the only logic they needed. At the other extreme, I've got another customer who wanted to do more checking. Use a UK example, right? I mean, I think the legal name of my employer is Hyland Software UK Limited. Well, when I registered, I could pick Hyland Software. I could put in Hyland Software UK. I could put in HS UK, right? So this one customer wanted to do a check because they wanted to make sure that the organization I said I worked for, while I'm sure it is, match the organization that they think I work for because they have it coded in a different way. So that behind the scenes process can be as simple and automated as your business allows it to be, or it can be as complex and as fully detailed as it also needs it to be. One of the things that's really important in this, and just in OnBase in general, there is no cost to the number of users you have on the OnBase system. That's not the way OnBase is licensed. OnBase is licensed based on people who are using it. And particularly with suppliers, we use this licensing model called query API blocks. It matters nothing. If you've got 100,000 suppliers or you've got 10,000 suppliers, it doesn't matter. All that matters is how many of those suppliers use it per hour. That's what you're going to play for. So a lot of people are scared that we create an individual user account for everyone who's using the portal, but we do that exactly for the reason you mentioned, the auditing, the traceability, all of that. We don't do it to make it more expensive to implement the solution. It will make no difference.
And what is a query? Just for those who may not be familiar with that term, what does that entail?
Yeah, no, good point. It's effectively a search. So it's asking for a list of invoices or a list of HR documents or whatever. That's a query. And that particular licensing model was developed exactly for that purpose of external users, where we couldn't tell how many were going to hit it, but we could in very broad bands say 1,000 an hour should be enough, or 2,000 an hour is going to cover the requirements, rather than very specifically working out individuals that were going to use it over that time.
Okay, thank you.
So if I log on here, and as I mentioned earlier, I just use my regular OnBase username and password, and I come into the main screen. So this just happens to be a vendor portal, and I'll show you a couple of examples in a minute. So again, at the risk of repeating myself, complete control over the icon up here. The colors, you don't have to have these disgusting colors. I don't know why we picked these, but anyway. But now you can see what I was talking about, the widget approach. So here we have 3 columns and split into 3 rows. So effectively we have a 3x3 grid. Happens that we don't have anything in the bottom right-hand corner, but basically it's a 3x3 grid. So we effectively just say we want this particular widget in that cell of the grid, this one in that cell. So starting up at the top here, we've got a really simple widget for just instructions. We can build HTML page into that widget, so you could do some pretty advanced stuff of instructions, that kind of thing. Jumping over to the right, these 2 pink widgets, these are probably the most simple thing that we use in Anger. And these are 2 instances of the same thing, a widget called Basic Search. And effectively, they are just firing a search on the OnBase system. So in this case, to give us a list of invoices. In the bottom case, to give us a list of purchase orders. Excuse me. So I can see those, and as I click on a particular document, you see that I go to a second page and a document gets opened up. So there's the particular invoice I asked to see, and you can see it brings the list with it. So rather than going back to the previous page, I can just pick different invoices in here and browse through them as I go along. Now, one of the things that makes WPT so flexible, you notice as a document loads, I'm getting a little PDF progress in the middle. However the document is stored in OnBase, whether it's a PDF, a TIFF file, a Word document, a AutoCAD drawing, one of the features of WPT is that we will automatically convert that file to a PDF file, and we do it on the fly. And the reason we do that is it means we need no document viewer as part of our solution. All the modern browsers can view PDF files. So we use that functionality, which means you could walk up to any browser anywhere, and providing you could see the URL, you'd be able to access the system without having to install anything.
So what if the customer internally put a annotation on the document that's for internal use only, but not for external use?
Good question. So we can go to this little ... menu, and it's kind of a yes and no answer. So you'll see on this menu that pops up, I have notes. Now, we don't visually see the notes on a document as we would in OnBase, okay? So the kind of yellow sticky note or a blue sticky note that means something different, we don't carry that visualization because we use this generic PDF viewer. This document hasn't got any notes, but if I would see them in here, I would see the text of the note. I could choose from the list of different notes that were available. And as you can see here, I can even add notes to the system. So they're not rendered with the visual side that they are in OnBase, but you can get to that information.
So this could be a means of communicating back and forth between my supplier and I as the vendor?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a few ways of doing it, but 100% that would be one way of doing it.
Okay.
While we're on that menu, we can also do things like viewing the OnBase keywords. So keywords are the data that indexes the documents within OnBase, and you can see things like the invoice number, date, amounts, and so on. We can do all of that. And we can even do things like look at related documents. Again, I don't know if this has one. No, it hasn't. Let's try and bring up another invoice. I think the Sherwood ones. So we can view an invoice, and I can go to related documents, and I believe, yeah, this has a link from the invoice to the corresponding purchase order. That's a feature of OnBase called a cross-reference. And again, it's defined in OnBase, but we render it within WPT. So I can switch back and forwards between the invoice, the PO, perhaps the credit note, perhaps some item of correspondence or something. Just regular OnBase cross-references to do that. If I go back to the home page, other things on here. I have an upload widget in green. I can define what types of documents I can upload. I can define what keywords I need to fill out to index those documents. And I mentioned that if I hit this on here, it goes off to my file system, and I can pick a file. If I ran this on a mobile, that blue button would go to my camera or my photos. I can do things, and this is kind of a cool little feature. If I view a document again, and through that menu, I also have an option here called Add to Favorites. Now, this is my own personal favorites. So this is almost like the recently used files in Word or something. And I can give it a name that's only relevant to me. It has nothing to do with anybody else. They're never going to see it. So I could say that this document is for the demo to IDT. And when I come back to the home page, or perhaps tomorrow morning after I've gone off and I've come back again, you can see in the favorites widget, there's demo to ITT, and I can just click on that to go straight to that document that's of some kind of particular interest to me. Maybe I ended the day with a conversation with the supplier. We didn't quite resolve it. We agreed we'd come back tomorrow morning. I can go straight to the invoice we were talking about, pick up the phone and give them a call.
Mm-hmm.
I can go to OnBase workflow. So this widget here is workflow. And in this case, I have 5 workflow queues. I can come in and I've got, at the moment, 21 documents in my pending approval. So they're all at the start of the process. I can pick out an invoice. Obviously, I can view it. But then I have access to my OnBase workflow actions. And I can even cut them down. Maybe if I went into one of our regular clients, there might be 6 or 7 actions that I could do here. But for most end users, for the people who are going to use this portal, the audience of this portal, they only really care about approving it, rejecting it, or flagging it as a duplicate. So having viewed the invoice, they can just hit approve. And 21 is going to go down. So we've approved one, that's gone up by 1, pending approval's gone down. To your point about the notes, if I pick another invoice, approve is a positive response, right? If I pick a particular invoice and I decide to reject this, I can set it up so that because rejection is negative, I've got to say why I'm rejecting it. And I can force a comment that I put in here, and when I put it into this field, what's actually going to happen, it's going to move the document on to rejected, so we've gone down 1 more, and we now have 1 in rejected. But it's also going to put a note on that rejected document. So in the way that you mentioned, we can capture that reason for rejecting. We'll see it as a note. We can act on the outcome of that note. Back on the homepage, obviously we have this pie chart. The pie chart is actually associated with workflow. So this, you can just see where our documents are sitting. So most of them are sitting at pending approval. We've now got 1 approved, 1 rejected. So it's just graphically reflecting that. Now, the last widget we have on here, this started almost as a joke and ended up to be one of our most popular features. This little widget allows the supplier in this case, or potentially the future student or the future employee, to electronically ask a question. So we could do something like, when you pay me, invoice number 72346, please, and we could submit that. And that will get passed through to our accounts payable department. And the reason it's so popular is that one of the issues is incoming phone calls distract you from what you're working on. So if the more phone calls you're getting, the more you're being distracted. What the customer that we built this for, they then get the questions. They come in here. They can open it either in here or in any other OnBase client, and put their response and submit it back again. And that communication, the suppliers can be pushed to communicate in that electronic way. And this particular, oops, I haven't touched that for a while. This particular customer that implemented this, what they do is at 4 o'clock every day, someone takes their turn on these incoming questions and they just work through the questions. And that customer reckons they've saved about 2.5 man days every week just by tidying up the communications in that way.
Wow.
The simple widget like that works. We've had other people talking to us about, at the moment, it's a question and a single response. We've had a couple of people ask to make it more conversational. We've even had a couple of people asking about an online chat facility where you can literally live chat with people. The way that we work within WPT is we're completely led by project and customer requirements, and all of those conversations are still kind of in the process. We know we can do it. It's just a question of whether we actually do it.
So let's just stop there for a minute and chat about that, because it brings up a thought we were discussing early when we opened this this discussion up about WPT, and that is the idea of custom widgets. So there are tons of chat tools in the market. There's tons of them. So if a partner or a customer wanted a chat session inside WPT, I mean, if that request came to us with the custom widget capability, we could build that using that off-the-shelf component for chat and bundle it into this custom widget and have that as an offering to bring to our customers. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, I can show you something similar. So what we're looking at, this website we call a gateway. It's just a term for the site you're going to build in WPT. Within a gateway, you can have as many applications as you like. Now, for me, this is my demo machine. So it's all sorts of bits and pieces that I've got involved with and projects that I'm working on, that kind of stuff. Probably a real-world example of a use of applications would be if you're writing an HR portal. Within the portal, you would have applications for employee onboarding, employee self-service, payroll, grievance procedures. All the subparts of the HR would be different applications. And the cool thing is applications directly tie to OnBase user groups. So you can decide who does and doesn't have access to different functionality just by setting the user groups within the OnBase system. So to your particular point, if I go into my mic test application, which I'll warn you now is my play pit, so there's all sorts of rubbish gets thrown in here. Here's a simple example. Customer in South America wanted a video within the portal. So we built a widget that just allowed them to embed a video within their OnBase system and then their WPT screen. So pretty simple, but straightforward customization. This is regular OnBase and regular WPT functionality. Folders within OnBase we fully support. So in an HR filing cabinet, for example, if we have the authority, we can see all the employees, we can see their documents within the different levels. If I logged on as Henry, then I would only see Henry's section of the employees, that kind of thing. But back to your point of an external system, these two widgets here, Data Viewer 3 and Data Viewer 4, which admittedly I haven't done any of the kind of visual stuff to, these actually integrate to an external database system called airtable.com. And nothing to do with Hyland, completely external system, but it has a good API. And these are two examples of custom widgets that are making a call out to Airtable, bringing back the data. In this case, this version I've got, it doesn't tie the two together, but obviously eventually the idea would be that we would click in the table list to see the corresponding single entry within the other widget, and that's ultimately what we did for this customer. But that's purely using this other API to incorporate it within a widget. So yeah, you have full control over it.
Great example of how we're exposing, a different line of business systems data inside of the WPT experience, and done quite easily. So thank you for showing that, because I know that's a question that is going to be going through viewers and listeners' minds. Is it's great that OnBase has their own portal, that can display documents and keywords, yada yada, participate in workflow. But the real world says I've got data coming from other systems that need to be, aggregated together in this user experience. And what we're showing here is that that's exactly what we have done. We've taken those external sources and linked them up with the Hyland experience through WPT.
Exactly.
So, excellent.
And then just quickly, a couple of last quick things I'll show you. Is an HR portal, variation on the same themes and different coloring, different graphics, that kind of thing. Here's another standard widget that you haven't seen yet, which is just a simple FAQ widget. So frequently asked questions that you can build into it. And all of these, I should have mentioned this earlier actually, everything is completely multilingual. We built WPT from the start to be multilingual. So probably a bigger issue for us over in Europe, but if I had Spanish users, I could detect it from their browser or choose it from a menu, and the UI is going to change accordingly, and we're going to get Spanish headers, Spanish instructions, and so on. So it's completely multilingual, and we also support American English as well. So don't panic. You don't have to have S's. You can use Z's and stuff as much as you like to.
All right.
And then one final thing I just want to show you. Back to our vendor portal that we looked at, I mentioned the fact that all this will work on a mobile phone. I'm currently in Google Chrome. I can use a feature of Chrome which looks a bit technical, but this little icon here is a simulator. And effectively, I can see how exactly the same website will operate on an iPhone or an iPad. And I can even rotate the iPad, and that's how it will appear landscape rather than portrait. So you'll see that just by changing the resolution of the device that's looking at it, the application changes accordingly. As soon as you go onto a phone, rather than our 3x3 grid, automatically we've gone into one long single column down the phone. But all the functionality will still be there. I can still get to my widgets. I can still go into workflow. I can still pick a document. Now, the only thing you can't do on this simulator that you would be able to do on an actual phone is you can't zoom in and out on the document, but you can see there's my invoice. So all of that will work on the phone quite happily.
Well, thank you so much for this demonstration. I think this really puts all the words that we chatted about in the very beginning into pictures here, and helps people, comprehend the power and the strength of the WPT offering. And I guess if you were, Mike, to kind of summarize a couple key takeaways, but what would you want people that are watching, listening to us to remember? Because there's a lot we talked about. We talked about the multilingual, the mobile ready stuff, multiple uses. Why don't you, since you've had a lot of experience with this offering, what are the one or two things that you have left customers with that they're like, well, I'm so glad we picked WPT, and here's why? What comes to mind?
First and foremost, it's about simplicity, right? I mean, we as people in the software industry, we can lose sight sometimes that it's ultimately about the simplicity of use, right? It's about the end users using the applications, right? We want people to come to our business, our company, rather than go down the street to somebody else. And, people's expectations of a responsive site that gives them the information they need when they want it, if they don't get that, they're going to go somewhere else. So it's about building a user interface that is simple, straightforward to use, does exactly the job without all the other stuff that is a distraction and unnecessary. It's about doing it in environments that allows people to use the way they want to work with it, whether it's a desktop or a mobile or a tablet, they can do that. But it's really just bringing, you say I'm passionate about WPT, I'm even more passionate about OnBase, right? 12 years is the longest I've stayed at any software company in all my career, and that's because I love OnBase. And, everything that OnBase is good at, but making it available in a simple way that just allows users to do what they want to do rather than make it overly complex that switches them off and kind of turns them against it.
Awesome. It's a great way to summarize WPT. And I apologize if I've overemphasized your passion on WPT, but that's what brought us together. And frankly, it's what I become very passionate about, because I like you, have been around OnBase for a while, and I know the strengths of the offering, and we're selling those every day to customers, communicating to prospects, and the strengths of the platform. And this is just one of those gems that I haven't seen emphasized enough, and I'm glad to have been exposed to it, to be able to bring it to our clients
and then, through this forum, expose it even on a greater basis, because I think this really does, address a very, very important need in the marketplace, and does it in such a, like you say, a simplistic manner that we haven't seen in the past. And I'm really jacked about it. I'm really excited. I appreciate you taking the time today with us.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Educate us all. Share your experiences. 12 years, a long time. And both of you and I think, have the gray. Well, you don't have any gray hair, do you? I do.
I've got plenty of grey hair. I've kept the lighting low so you can't see it. But
yeah, so we've been around a while, and sure we have a lot of stories to share. But this is exciting times to be in our industry, and I appreciate you taking the time today to spend with myself and our listeners and viewers. Thank you for that.
yeah, you've just got to go back and add subtitles now for everyone who couldn't understand my accent.
You did quite well. Oh, we have to worry about that.
Good stuff.
Right.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a lot of fun.
It has been. And have a great rest of it's the afternoon, evening for you now. So go home and enjoy the time with your family.
Will do. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye now.